See, Hear, Love, and our Ask the Experts panel. Welcome Mary, Ellen, Sue, and Debra. Welcome all of you. Woohoo! It's good to have us all back together. I know everybody's been really busy. And I'm so glad we're back for this topic, longing for love and belonging.
Yep.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
So I think this conversation is going to be really important. Now, Mary, just quickly, you brought this to my attention, like this is really important. You're seeing people really struggling with this. Why?
Yeah, well, it's such a core part of how we're wired. It's part of our identity. It's part of our survival that we need to be in relationships.
Right.
And so a lot of issues come up because of this being unresolved or broken or struggling in these areas. So I thought this would be a perfect time. We're in the month of February, the month of love.
Yes.
To talk about this.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Love this. Okay, so Debra, I want to ask you, let's start with Debra, because I want to ask about, in this longing for love and belonging, many of us make really bad decisions about relationships, and we live and we choose unhealthy relationships. Why is that? Should we know better?
Well, that's a tricky question. Should we know better? Because, you know, one thing that I've found with working with a lot of clients, especially with toxic relationships or cycles of unhealthy relationships, is that we attract and engage with people based on what we believe we deserve. So when our beliefs are not in line with God's truth, we're going to start making poor relationship choices because it's based on what we believe we deserve. And there's so many different factors that get in the way of us believing good and healthy things about who we are, our identity in Christ. And a lot of that stems from brokenness from our past, things we've experienced in our family of origin, a lack of love, neglect, trauma, whatever it might be. We start believing unhealthy things about ourselves, and then our relationships begin to line up to those unhealthy beliefs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to take a pause on that because I'm just literally going back into my history and seeing what actually caused some of my poor relationship choices. Now, Ellen and Sue, I see you nodding as Debra's talking. You're like, yes, yes. What are you two thinking as she says this about choosing unhealthy relationships? Ellen.
Yeah, and I see this again. It feels one of those, like, this feels a bit raw because we all have had bad and tough relationships. And it's that brokenness that that it kind of can be our blind spot in my experience. So you've got this blind spot saying, I don't realize how I keep picking these relationships. And actually, you have to have good friends. Like I have Mary saying, Ellen, you see the world with rose-colored glasses, and helping me understand that my Enneagram 2 is getting in my way of having healthy relationships because I just want to help people that don't want to be helped.
Right.
Exactly.
And
I like kicking
you know, for myself, and I see it so often, it's just this self-fulfilling prophecy of, you know, I so want to be accepted. I so want to be loved. If I keep trying harder, if I just keep pushing, if I can convince you that I'm worthy, then it will finally work. And it will never work. If it is one-sided, but it's so hard to break that cycle.
Oh, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I was going to add, like, it's, you know, recognizing our past and our history absolutely impacts the way we do relationships. But for those of us who've grown up in, you know, very difficult home environments, we tend to actually idealize what relationships ought to be like. Well, only when I find my Prince Charming, or if I just get out of this situation, or if I find that perfect person. And then of course, life always falls short. Relationships always fall short. And so one of the things we talk about often is that we're not seeking perfect, we're seeking good enough. And that's important.
Well, imagine, I mean, this is why this conversation is so important, because if we can just stop one young woman or man from making an unhealthy relationship choice because they're listening to this and go, oh, I should look back at these things. I want to go back, Debra, to what you said, and maybe just quickly around the circle about causes of why we go into unhealthy relationships. Because you said trauma, family of origin. What other things, and Sue and Ellen and Mary, think about that maybe from personal, but what are some of the things that people can relate to that are like, that has caused me to choose?
Well, I also want people to realize that it doesn't have to be as extreme as trauma, neglect, abuse, because we all have something in our life that shapes what we believe about ourselves. Maybe you were bullied in high school, maybe an ex broke your heart, maybe it doesn't have to be this huge thing. I think the key is really getting to the bottom of, what do I really believe about myself? What do I really believe that I deserve? Because it might not be as big and drastic, this big thing in your past. It could just be a series of tiny little beliefs. And I think sometimes those unhealthy beliefs become so familiar to us that we don't even recognize we're believing them. And we choose what's familiar over what's healthy. So it really takes work for us to kind of isolate those insecurities and things that might be holding us back.
Wow, that's good. Sue,
I
for
love
you?
what you just said there. I love what you just said about not really stopping and understanding what it is we deserve. I speak to so many young women who are in unhealthy relationships and talk to them about how they deserve to be treated. And sometimes it's just like this light goes on of, I never really actually believed that because I never asked myself that question.
So good.
And we can compromise. So in this idea of, okay, it's good enough. We don't have to have the perfect friendship or relationship, but it's good enough. And sometimes I think we just start stretching our boundaries, and they keep stretching till you don't recognize who you are anymore, and why you can't remember how you got to this place, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because we just wanted that connection so badly.
We want love so badly. So if we're getting cues from people that I need to be this way or that way or this way, then that shapes the way I respond to them, the way I respond to relationships.
Good. Mary, one of the things too is we're sort of defining why we choose unhealthy relationships. There might be the blind spots if we don't even know we're in an unhealthy relationship.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about what does an unhealthy relationship look like? Because I think some people are going to be like, oh, I'm in an unhealthy relationship. No wonder I feel this way, or no wonder. So I want to hear from you all about what is an unhealthy relationship.
Yes. If it was so evident that you're being abused, it's easy to call it out, easier. But it's the subtleties, it's the ways in which the unhealth kind of hides underneath the surface. So as an example, enmeshed relationships. Well, what's an enmeshed relationship? So when people don't have good boundaries between each other. What about a codependent relationship? That's when your unhealth somehow validates or continues to support my unhealth as mine does yours. And we stay in this dance because it kind of works, but it doesn't really, because it keeps us in these unhealthy patterns. But the one that really I've struggled with is something I call nice narcissism.
Narcissism.
Yes, that is so hard to identify because they're kind. In person, when you talk to them, they're lovely, they're warm, they're friendly. But something seems a little off because they don't follow through with what they commit to do. And if there's any issues, they never take responsibility. I mean, that's one of the signs of narcissism, an unwillingness to take responsibility for their part. They aren't able to see the damage or the hurt that they do. And somehow they're able to reframe things that they're the victim.
Oh.
So
those are three big ones.
Big ones. And then as somebody who's a people pleaser, I end up thinking, maybe it is my fault. And I'm apologizing. I end up like self-gaslighting. I'm believing that somehow I'm the one who's guilty and I have to fix it.
Wow. Those are big. I'm like processing this, going, okay, I'm thinking through. Sue, Ellen, Debra. So Sue, for you, what would you say an unhealthy relationship looks like in your experience, or in the people that you know and that you've seen?
Yeah, for me, often what I see is it's very one-sided, is that when you are in the relationship, or when you come out of a conversation, even a difficult conversation, there's a winner and there's a loser. And in my mind, if it's a healthy relationship, both people, even if it's been really difficult, come out better people. And when it's one-sided and one person is always walking away, holding on to that little bit of power, and someone else is walking away with a little bit less, it's very unhealthy for me.
So a power dynamic for you. It's sort of saying there's always like a winner and loser. It's a power dynamic.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Ellen?
Yeah, for me, it's that when you always are walking on eggshells. You're afraid to say the wrong thing. You know that if you say even just slightly the wrong thing, you won't be forgiven. It'll never be forgotten. But you stay in that friendship or that relationship because it feels like you don't want to sacrifice it. And so you'll sacrifice your own mental health instead of sacrificing the friendship.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. These are
Yeah,
really
and
good.
going with what Sue was saying, one thing that I've observed in my life and in others is, to me, a healthy relationship is like a plant. And I think one thing that we don't realize is that you can give a plant too much water and you will kill that plant.
Yes.
A lot of times in relationships, we talk about not giving enough, especially in Christianity. You just got to give more, give more, give more. But here's the thing, if you give too much, you will kill that relationship. And for me, to avoid one-sided relationships, I've had to really take ownership of my tendency to give too much and learn to set boundaries and watch how the health of that relationship unfolds. So sometimes it actually means learning to give a little bit less.
Wow.
Oh, wow. So we've got give a bit less.
Yeah.
If we're walking on eggshells, if there's a power dynamic, nice narcissism, codependency. I think we've covered a lot of them.
things,
I think everybody here's like, check, or at least one, or maybe a couple. This is really good. I can't wait to have more conversation about how, from identifying unhealthy relationships,
what do we do
about it now into health?
Exactly. So good. So to continue this conversation, let's go to Colleen Blake Miller. She's a registered psychotherapist and a past guest on See Her Love. And she shares from the good word, Romans 12:5. So it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other.
Thank you, Melinda and panel, for such a great discussion. Such an important topic. When I think of love and belonging, the longing for love and belonging, the passage in Romans 12:5, it reminds us not to think too highly of ourselves and our abilities, but it says, so it is with Christ's body. We are many parts of one body, and we all belong to each other. When I think of my own experiences around this subject, I am brought back to years growing up in elementary and junior high school, being the only Black girl in all of my classes, and really feeling like I didn't belong, really feeling like I didn't fit in. And for anybody watching who can relate to an experience like that, it can be very, very devastating. But this challenge around longing for love and belonging, it doesn't just speak to those who feel as though they're outcast. It's really just a human experience. We come out of the womb crying for attention, crying for love, crying for a sense of security. And we don't outgrow that because we have been created by a relational God as relational beings. There is a longing within us to connect, to be loved. And this is nothing to be ashamed of. So it is God's will that we all live from a place where we experience his love and genuinely know that we belong to him. It is also our responsibility as followers of Christ to create spaces where others experience love and where others recognize that they belong. So today I challenge us to prayerfully consider how we can begin to love those within our community, to love our neighbors, as it were, a little bit more today.
Thanks, Colleen Blake Miller. I love her thoughts on the good word on this verse. All right, we're moving now from unhealthy relationships to choosing healthy relationships. Yay! All right. So this is what we're really going to help people here. So let's start with this. What are some of the qualities that help people feel that they belong? What do you see as a result of this? So I think towards healthy relationships, we need a sense of belonging. What is it going to take? Debra, let's start with you. Your thoughts on that?
I'm looking for a relationship with trust. I think that's one of the big things that we're looking for when it comes to developing healthy relationships, that give and take. We talked earlier about the plant analogy. A relationship with trust, both parties are giving and receiving. And so I think the give and take is a really important part of growth and healthy relationships.
Okay. It's good. Sue?
Yeah, I think when we are able to acknowledge one another without feeling we need to agree with one another is incredibly powerful. There's so many reasons why we avoid conversations and avoid connections because we feel there's going to be this conflict, but we don't need to agree. We just need to understand and get to know people.
Yeah, that's really
Very
good.
good.
Yeah, and I would say when we, not to play off the name of the show, but when we know that we are seen and we are heard and we are loved in a relationship, then it allows us to take risks and it allows us to grow in new ways. And I think, so we have to be those people that commit to seeing other people and knowing them and not just imagining what we think they should be, but seeing them for who they are. It allows them to actually grow and for us to grow together.
Oh, that's good.
So good. Yeah, it's interesting that science shows that we all have these same needs. So kind of going practically, the aspect about communication, we long for clarity in communication. Talk to us directly, be kind as you do it so we know what to expect. I mean, that's the same as parents, certainly the same in a work environment, so important. Another aspect is the autonomy to make your own decisions.
Okay.
Within the context of the age and stage that the child is at, or the responsibility or skill level of the team member, but like that you respect me in having a say is so important. Also the freedom to fail. Like I can fail and I can grow and I can learn, and this is important. All too often we step in and we either try to correct or we're, criticizing, and it shuts people down. The ability to have safety, physical safety for sure, but even emotional and psychological safety.
Yeah, I'm thinking through all these things. These are big things because this is what we're choosing toward and in healthy relationships.
Yeah.
But I also need to be a person to create healthy relationships.
Exactly.
Right? Like I have to put the onus on me as I'm thinking this. I'm like,
Yes.
wait a second. Am I creating codependency? Wait, am I having am I the power person here in this? Like I'm actually, as you're thinking, you guys, I'm actually personally doing inventory of relationship. What is that like, Sue, Ellen, and Debra, Mary, like, how do you put that onus on yourself to say, I want to be a person that creates healthy relationship?
Well, if you're not healthy, you cannot have healthy relationships.
Right. Yeah.
It's not possible.
Yeah.
So you're on the right track.
Debra,
sure.
your thoughts as I'm thinking through this?
It's true. It's true. Healthy people make healthy relationships. And even with my clients, a lot of times I'll put the ownership on them. And what's interesting, you guys, is that sometimes people in our culture push back against that. And they say, well, don't shame people. Don't make it all their fault. But I don't see it as shaming. I see it as, if you have no role in the relationship, then you have no control because you can't control what other people do. So you almost have to put it on you as far as, how can I set boundaries? How can I give less? How can what can I do to create these healthy relationships? So I think this is a really important point, Melinda.
Very much.
I think it is as well. And I don't think we can underestimate the need to ask for feedback and to have conversations I can think that what I am doing is fostering a healthy relationship, but if that's not how it's being received or perceived, then it's not helpful. And so I need to be willing to learn and be vulnerable and realize that there are things that I may be able to do better.
Yeah.
I mean, doing better, we need to create these safe spaces, and I can't emphasize that enough. And I actually encourage having a safe space manifesto. And I mean, I'm the one who has to be guided by that manifesto and then other people. So how do we not talk about each other in ways that would tear people down? How do we show up when we talk to each other? How do we cultivate the relationship in a way that really is safe? Because I have learned over and over that as women, we are so longing for those safe relationships. We have to be those safe people.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, Jesus. As all of us are Jesus followers, how does Jesus play into when we're in an unhealthy relationship? What do we do? And when we're moving towards, or we may be in a healthy relationship? How does Jesus work in how we live, create safe spaces, and all the things you've said? Because I think that's an important part. I don't think it's a separate part. It's definitely an integrated, full-on Jesus as part of this. Mary, let's start with you.
Yeah, we are made to be in relationship with God. I mean, I've heard it said before, there's a God-sized hole in our heart. And when we are moving towards other people, they always fall short. And we then end up in a place of insecurity and fear and possessiveness and jealousy and all that not so good things for relationships. But if we recognize that that hole is meant to be filled with God, and I can really allow His Spirit not just to be in me, but to experience His love at a deep felt level, then if I know I am so loved and I don't have to do a single thing to earn a bit more of His love, I don't need to go around trying to please everybody else and trying to make them love me.
Yeah.
Right? So it's so key. I mean,
That's
it's
freeing.
the answer.
Yeah, that's freeing.
Yeah.
That's very liberating and freeing as we go about life. That's great.
Yeah.
Sue?
Yeah, to be really practical, I think the greatest example that Jesus gave us is He just is love. And, you know, if I go by my default, there's lots of days where I just don't feel love. And the choice that I have when I don't feel love is to choose to show love, because that's what He did. And if I choose to show love, the feeling of love is usually right behind it.
Right.
So it's actionable.
Yeah, that's good.
Very
100% actionable, yeah.
And I would say, you know, I've studied a lot about attachment theory as an adoptive mom. And to remember that I think God is really the author of attachment theory. He knows that we are safe in Him. We are seen in Him. We are known, fully known in Him, and accepted as we are and loved that way. It allows us to take risks in relationship, and it allows us to try new things, and it allows us to be ourselves and to say, I know I'm broken, and I'm going to be okay because God has my back. And I can step back into Him for the affirmation and not looking for the affirmation from other people.
Yeah,
Good.
that's so good. I love that, you know, kind of replacing what we think with God's truth. If what we said earlier is true, we engage with relationships based on what we believe that we deserve. Well, those unhealthy beliefs need to be replaced by God's truth.
Exactly.
And for me, that was such a huge part in starting the process of developing healthy relationships. If you believe I need to be good in order to be loved, God says you are loved just as you are. If I believe, well, I can't have healthy relationships because of my past, I don't deserve it, God says you deserve it because of what Christ has done in and through you. When you start changing those beliefs about what you believe about the world, what you believe about yourself, it starts to change the dynamic of your relationships too. And I think it's a daily process of checking in. Okay, what do I really believe about myself, and how is that overflowing into my relationships?
Powerful. And you know, when I think back to what Colleen shared about that we are all one body, we all belong to one another. I think as women, as we're sharing, there is a commitment here that we as women that follow Jesus need to create those spaces for healthy relationships. And if we are in an unhealthy relationship, if I'm kind of the perpetrator of it or the instigator of it, then I need to be responsible and be honest about it.
Yeah.
If I find myself in an unhealthy relationship, then what you're all saying, it's like, what do I do? So what is that then? What is the first step? If I'm like, okay, I realize I'm in an unhealthy relationship, what's the first thing I can do then to make that step forward towards a healthy relationship? And I know that there's some circumstances where there may be like leaving the relationship, but what would you say, really practical, that could be the first step towards healthy relationship, Mary?
Inside out. So look within yourself, like you
Okay.
said,
Yeah.
be the healthiest version of yourself, get some support as you need to. But then on the outside, you begin to look at your relationships and which ones are healthy, which ones are not, and how are you going to set boundaries. And some of those relationships may have to end if that person is unwilling to own their part. And that's such a powerful place to be able to say, I have say over my heart and my relationships.
Okay, so first thing is inside out, have sort of an inventory,
That's
what's going on, and then we set those boundaries
Yes.
on
Right.
to protect
Change
ourselves.
myself,
Okay.
and then decide how does this affect relationships outside? Which ones are healthy,
Okay.
not healthy? Which ones are open? And I always give people a chance, at least have the honest conversation. And if they're resistant or they're not willing to own their part of it, then you know that relationship can't continue in a healthy way.
Okay, and it is okay, I just want you to all affirm to me, it is okay to end a relationship.
Absolutely.
Okay, because there's a lot of people who say, I can't end a relationship, I'll just kind of keep it going. But what you're
Right.
saying is, if it's unhealthy, you can and you should end it.
And you
Okay.
may be preventing them from growing because they're not facing truth.
Okay, that's good. Okay, Ellen, a takeaway
and
here
I'll
of what we
say
can
it-
do.
It's okay to end a relationship, but it's sure not easy.
Yes.
That's, one of the things to remember. And I can't take any credit for this. This is 100% Mary, because we had a call one time, we were talking as friends, and she said to me, Ellen, I think you have some unhealthy relationships. And she actually challenged me to categorize my relationships, which felt so gross and horrible. But she said, you have to think of who are the people who really are it's a mutual friendship where you're really building into each other's lives. And then who are the people that are just for having fun with, that you're acquaintances and you have fun. And then who are the people that you're doing ministry to? And if that doing ministry to category is way bigger than the people that you have a mutually beneficial relationship, you need to actually look at where you're building friendships.
Right.
That was a huge challenge to me, super practical.
Good, great. Okay, let's keep going.
I'd go back to the.
Yeah, go ahead, Debra.
I'd go back to the boundaries conversation again, just because I think it's so important for us as women. When I sense that there's an unhealthy relationship in my life, now what? Now it's on me to do something about it, because now that I'm aware of it, I've got to take inventory of how I'm investing my time.
Yeah.
I've got to take inventory of my emotional expenditure, my communication, how much I'm giving to that relationship, and realize, okay, if I really want to protect myself from unhealthy relationships, I got to set boundaries around my life. I've got to pull back. I've got to be able to say no and not commit, or not engage as much, not be available at, this person's beck and call. And so I think to just really take inventory of our boundaries and how we're actually interacting and what we're giving is so empowering to start changing the dynamic.
Okay, and Sue.
And I think, before the result is an unhealthy relationship, there are a lot of unhealthy behaviors that we need to be aware of. And we need to have those conversations to agree on what the healthy behaviors look like, and then hold each other accountable. And if it's one-sided, it doesn't work. I remember very early on, before I married my husband, us defining what trust and respect would look like, how we would actually demonstrate that. And when we agreed on what that would look like, both of us had to be willing to change our behavior. It's the best conversation I think we've ever had.
Well, this is one of the best conversations I've ever had.
Yes.
In that, so much
Scary,
learning
but good.
about the honesty of identifying unhealthy relationships and the causes, and that gives us pause to go, oh, and then the permission, but you guys, for you women who all have given us permission to say, if we are in an unhealthy relationship, here are steps of how we can identify them and leave them and end them. And it's good, I think, for a lot of us women, and for me, I'll speak personally, as a people pleaser, you just want to have everybody with you and never end anything, because then that's bad, and a broken relationship is bad. But it's bad if you stay in an unhealthy relationship.
Absolutely.
And I think that the Jesus part, where you say Jesus is love, putting that against the relationship, is this a loving relationship as Jesus loves, and kind of look at that example. So thank you all. I wish we had way more time. This is a really important conversation. So thank you, Debra and Sue and Ellen and Mary, for your time. And I think there's a lot of our viewers and listeners who have learned a lot from today. And if you want more information about these incredible women and the work that they do, go to seehearlove.com. There's lots of blogs and resources and good words for you there. And as you look for love and healthy relationships in all the right places, we're here for you, because we're doing the same thing, ensuring we have healthy, life-giving, and robust, loving relationships in our own lives. We're praying for you, and always know you are seen, heard, and deeply loved by God. Thanks for joining us.